Nobody likes this. Everybody hates this. I'm here live on location at Patton Avenue in Asheville, North Carolina. Probably everybody's least favorite part of the entire city, to be honest. Pretty much nobody ever likes to be here for any reason. And you only come here if you have to. Can you see that McDonald's in the shot? We've got our golden arches right there. So what I'm trying to figure out is like, if this place is designed to be maximally efficient for the car and for no one else, why does it also suck to drive in? Wait. While I'm talking to you, I'm gonna have this video of myself trying to cross Patton Avenue up in the corner so you can see how long it takes. The past several years of my life can be described as nothing other than a precipitous descent into car-induced psychosis. This problem of car dependency has completely consumed me. It started off as just a curiosity about the way places made me feel, and then I started to wonder why they made me feel that way. And then I started to question why they were constructed that way. And once you start to go down that rabbit hole, the worse it gets. The less sense everything makes, the more confusing it all becomes. And the closer that you look, the harder it becomes to ignore the ways that car dependency has shaped your life. I realized that before I got my license, the only way for me to go literally anywhere was to depend on an adult in my life to do me the favor of taking the time out of their day to drive me. Kids that grew up in the exurbs and had access to a car to drive, getting your license is something you look forward to so much because it literally means freedom. It means society granting you the privilege of going somewhere, of just being able to go to a place. That's something that you gain in the US when you're 16 and are rich enough to have a car to drive. So when I got my license, I was so thrilled to have it until I started driving and I realized how much it sucks. I realized that every day that I go to work, I'm rolling the dice on whether or not this is the day where my commute to work kills me or someone else. And that could easily happen. Isn't it morbid to tell your friends to text you when they get home safely? Because there's a good chance that they're gonna get hurt or killed in a car accident on the way home? That's not inevitable. They don't do that in places where people don't drive cars. I realized that in order to go to the bar with your friends, someone has to be designated driver or try to drink little enough that it's probably gonna be fine. Or you have to do some other car-based solution that's really expensive and inconvenient. I realized that if you don't want to pay for parking at the airport, or if your car breaks down and you need to go to the mechanic, or if for some other reason you can't use your car, you have to get someone else to drive you to those places, and it's a big inconvenience on you and on them. I realized that owning a car means buying the car, but it also means paying for the car insurance and paying for the maintenance costs of the car and paying for the climate-destroying fuel for the car, which is still extremely expensive, even despite the absurd federal subsidy. If you want to go to a friend's house, you're gonna have to risk your life and probably sit through a lot of traffic. The more you have to drive, the greater your risk of being killed on the road, or worse, accidentally killing someone else on the road. It starts to become clear that driving is not the right mode of transportation for every single situation. Driving is good sometimes, but it's not good for every single thing that you ever have to do. In America, we have a very small and dwindling number of places built before the year 1955 that weren't decimated by urban renewal projects and suburban sprawl gutting the historic downtowns that existed there. Some of them still exist, but if you can't afford to live there, then you're fucked. You have to have a car, or you have to have a severely inconvenienced life. There is no viable alternative when every single place is 50% parking lot. So I came to realize all of this stuff, but my assumption was that all of these places that made me feel really bad inside to be in and that I found very unpleasant to drive in or be in as a pedestrian, I figured they existed for a reason, right? It seems like that must be the most cost-effective or efficient way for those things to be built. Everybody hates it, but it's the inevitable result of the economic system and we have to deal with it, right? I assumed that there was something greater than my understanding that made it logical for all of these places with 8 lanes of through traffic and businesses with giant parking lots on the other side. Hold that thought, it's time to cross a street with 8 lanes of through traffic and businesses with giant parking lots on either side. Oh good, it's safe to cross now. I've crossed, I can go to all of these different businesses, like the Wells Fargo or the abandoned Kmart or the abandoned auto body shop. How do you guys like Patton Avenue? Is it good? It fucking sucks, right? Okay, back to the point I was trying to make. Let's run it back. So I came to realize all of this, but basically assumed that these horrible places that I hated that were car dependent with tons of through traffic and big parking lots and businesses on either side, I came to figure all of that must be inevitable, right? Everybody hates these places, so we wouldn't build them unless it was absolutely necessary. These places are so horrible to inhabit and exist in that it must be the result of some economic issue, right? Like maybe it's cheaper for the DOT to build a place like that than a place like a historic downtown. And that's basically how I felt from the ages of maybe 17 to 21. And then the issue started to really get a chokehold on me when I realized that all of those assumptions are like demonstrably false. It is so expensive. It is obscenely expensive to build a STROAD. It is obscenely expensive to maintain a STROAD. It's obscenely expensive to maintain the parking lots and all of the pipes and our cities are absolutely bleeding money. And yet we're still making places like this. It doesn't make any sense. It was at this point in the shoot that a very aggressive woman came up to me and yelled at me, demanding that I stop filming there. So this weird transition's her fault. Some of my earliest memories are of myself sitting in the back of the minivan driving around. I have this one specific memory of sitting in traffic on I-40 west of Greensboro. That part of the road, I think, is like 12 or 13 lanes wide. It's insane. But I remember it made me feel gross. It made me feel like kind of disgusted. Because when you're in a space like that, something feels wrong about it. Something feels like you're not supposed to be there. Needless to say, it was not a whole vibe, nor a schmood. I get kind of weirdly, extremely fixated on really niche topics. Growing up, I was always so interested by the construction of highways and new roads. I think the thing that interested me most was to go on Street View and look at places where they had recently installed new stretches of highway, and look at like the back roads where people used to live and what happened once the highway came through. I had this like morbid curiosity about the way that places are completely transformed and destroyed by the construction of highways. That was about as far as it went for me until I started driving. So I'm going to take Patton Avenue as an example of a road that functions poorly and try to understand how it happened. So it's time for the Patton postmortem. I want to figure out how this road got so bad. I basically live on like a 5-lane STROAD that is immediately connected to a highway exit. So yeah, we get a lot of traffic noise at our house. In order to understand what happened with Patton Avenue, you have to understand the principle of induced demand. Hello. So typically a future STROAD is a back road that is adjacent to a growing city of sprawl. These roads begin as high-speed connections between places, as a way from point A to point B, and they often retrace very old historic routes. Over time, these roads might gain some sparse commercial and residential uses for the people who live nearby, but generally speaking, it is a route to get from one place to another. So when two of these back roads intersect, oftentimes businesses will open up on the corner because potential business owners have correctly identified that they'll have the greatest exposure to through traffic there. And then also it makes a lot of sense when you think about it that these are often gas stations / convenience stores or like auto body / mechanic shops. They're usually pretty car-centric services. They're motorist-oriented. So this is kind of okay, right? Because these roads that are meant to connect one place to another have created a new place in the center that is connected to the other places that used to be connected to one another. Having a new emerging place is not bad. There's nothing wrong with that. You can tell this by the fact that there is a four-way stop. What that means is that drivers have to slow to a complete stop and communicate with one another before traveling through the intersection. So the drivers are going to be actively paying attention to their safety. But then also, it means that the cars will be traveling slow speeds when they're passing by these businesses, which is good because those are places with complex turning movements and people that are around. So you want the vehicles to go slow for everyone's safety. So all of this commercial and residential activity induces greater demand for the area, generating more trips to and from these stores through the intersection. Now, this intersection started off as a high-speed vehicular connection from one place to another. So it wasn't designed for anyone other than people in cars, but we're starting to get congestion as more and more cars need to go through the intersection. So what does the DOT do? Well, they expand the capacity for cars. Congestion builds up, accidents happen, residents complain, and the DOT responds in a seemingly natural way. They upgrade the thoroughfare with a series of safety enhancements and other improvements, aka raise the capacity so that more cars can get through the fucking intersection. Cass! I'm making movie. So now that we have congestion building at the four-way stop, the first thing that the DOT introduces in a situation like this is a traffic signal. Now, I want to be very clear on the point of traffic lights. My assumption was always that traffic lights are there for safety, that going up to a stop sign doesn't give you an assigned time when you're definitely allowed to go, which introduces more variability, whereas a traffic light tells you exactly when you're supposed to go through the intersection and when you're not. It seems safer, right? Here's what traffic lights are actually for. The reason the DOT loves this specific solution so much is because it raises the speed that vehicles can travel through the intersection. Before, every vehicle that reaches the intersection has to come to a stop. But now that we have a traffic light installed, if the light's green and there's no one in your way trying to turn at a 45-mile-an-hour road with a traffic light, you pass through the intersection at 45 miles an hour. Okay, hot take, my opinion is that this should actually never happen. The whole idea of cars going 45 miles an hour, which is a deadly speed to go in your car through an intersection where there's cross traffic because you looked at a little light bulb and you saw that it was the correct color, that is so dangerous, bro. I don't see any reason that it ever makes sense to have cars pass through a conflict point where there's other through traffic coming through at a speed as deadly as 45 miles an hour. That just should not happen, especially if there's like unprotected right turns and unprotected left turns. Like, you're just begging for people to die. The thing about four-way stops is that they require people to stop and then communicate with one another, which is a really good way to get people to pay attention and act in a safe way while they're driving. Unlike traffic lights, which you kind of can just mindlessly not pay attention to and follow the rules and you're good, in case someone fucks up, in which case you might die. So given the fact that this new place is along a route from one place to another, it makes sense that there's going to be through traffic trying to pass through that's going to cause congestion. And adding this traffic light will, for a moment, relieve that congestion by increasing the capacity and speed of the intersection. The problem is, motorists who might take other routes or behave in a different way are going to start to use that route more now that they know that it's more efficient than whatever other option they would have. In other words, it is going to induce more people to use the intersection. So the congestion will come back, and when it does, DOT engineers have another trick up their sleeve. Turning lanes increase the capacity and speed of the intersection by getting motorists that are trying to turn left and sometimes turn right if there's a right turn lane out of the way of motorists that are trying to pass straight through the intersection, which enormously increases the capacity once again. Oops, we have congestion again. DOT, what are you gonna do? What's the game plan? What's the move? We're gonna raise that capacity! Oh fuck, this place sucks to be in now. Fuck this, wait, this was a terrible idea. As soon as they add 2 lanes for through traffic right next to businesses, especially with additional turn lanes, like extra left and right turn lanes, to me, that's when it just like goes way too far. Like, I don't know that anyone ever looks at a road after these kinds of projects are completed and doesn't feel at least some degree of loss associated with the fact that a place that was once beautiful and had interesting character now looks exactly like every other place in the entire country and is like super dangerous and ugly and frustrating to drive in and frustrating to be in as a pedestrian. Like, why do these projects happen? Why do we ever widen the roads to this extent? It's clearly a fucking terrible design. Widening through traffic to have 2 lanes of traffic in either direction and then like extra left turn lanes and extra right turn lanes is so obscenely expensive compared to the benefit that it provides. It's like ridiculous. Especially when the project comes with other massive costs, like installing extra traffic signals that slow people down and are super dangerous. So these DOT upgrades and improvements, despite the fact that they are super inefficient for cars, super dangerous to exist in, and also wildly expensive, I also just think that they are so much worse to inhabit. They feel so terrible. I mean, all of these businesses have so much parking. Nothing is at a human scale. The signs are huge and meant to appeal to motorists. Crossing the road is like crossing a fucking football field. It's just a terrible fucking vibe. I mean, this design is so bad for people because it makes traffic worse. It makes the safety worse. It makes the experience of being there worse. And yet, we still pour tens of millions and hundreds of millions and literally billions of dollars into this annually. It's like, what are we doing? This is how you design a road if you want it to become as congested as possible. Patton Ave, Tunnel Road, Brevard Road, Smoky Park Highway, Hendersonville Road, Sweeten Creek Road, Merriman Ave, Broadway. We have no shortage of these terrible STROADS in our city. And there's even more in all of the other cities in North Carolina. I mean, Asheville is pretty tame compared to the stratification of the rest of the state and all of the rest of the states in the whole country. I lived in Raleigh for 2 years. That place is a STROADerific hellscape. Considering how absolutely nestled we are into the Blue Ridge Mountains, you would think we would take more care of the places that we are able to build around here. But instead, we keep making these terrible, terrible places. When I have this conversation with people, a lot of times the reaction is, this is just how it is. We can't fix Patton Ave. These places are already built in a terrible way, but we're too far gone. This is the situation. And I think people might be right to a certain extent about that, but here's the thing. We're still building more of these. Asheville has a lot of problems as a city, and I feel certain that a small amount of money could go a very long way in improving this place. But instead, we are about to invest literally hundreds of millions of dollars into something that makes our place worse. I can't accept that. I cannot accept us continuing to pour money into this horrendous hole that is literally going to lead to the end of people's lives. And in doing so, make a shitty place that everyone hates. No new STROADS. Period. I'm worried that this video is actually going to be super boring and interesting only to someone like me, but I'm doing this for the first time. I'm just giving it a try, and I don't know if I'm going to be good at it yet or if I'm going to put in the effort to get good at it yet. But if you enjoy listening to me talk about urbanism and all of these issues at length, please let me know, because I have a whole fucking book's worth of knowledge in my brain that I'm just ready to spill online for the whole world to see. I'm gonna do at least one more of these for certain.